Angelica, do you like baseball? You a baseball fan? You're a Sox. Am I doing that right, fan?
No, you're not. Swaks. You
Sox.
sound like you're from Long Island. I'm gonna
Well,
take
we
my
have a
dog
guest
to the
coming on
ball
later who is
game.
from Long Island.
So I don't know how to answer that because I'm sure you're a baseball fan, right?
Not as much as I used to be. When I was a kid, it was the thing. I was obsessed with baseball, and I don't even really follow the majors anymore. Not in a real way.
Okay, so I don't want to come off as like a fraud, which is why I'm careful about how I answer this question. I love baseball. I did not as a kid. Um, I really started liking it in college because I would get $5 like bleacher seats to Fenway Park because they just sucked and you could go for $5 and they served you if you were underage. And so we would just go on a nice spring day and just sit out there and drink beers and it was $5. And then the strike happened when I was in college. So
Mm.
but I really learned to love baseball when I was reporting in Boston. And obviously, I covered the 2004 run up to the World Series. And so that was, I think, in 26 years, my number one as far as the best thing you've covered, the most fun you've had as a reporter. And I'm not a sports reporter, obviously. But I feel bad because I don't pay attention anymore until they get like into the playoffs. And with the Red Sox, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I don't want to say I'm this huge baseball fan, but I love it. I love how slow it is. I love the dead time in a baseball game. I know people have been complaining about that for forever, but I kind of like that about baseball.
I think in person, I like those moments as well. The hard part is on television. It's a little harder to deal with, I think. You know, I don't know. When you're in the game, at the game, when the pitcher steps off the rubber or whatever the delay is, you can look around, you can look at the outfielder and just these little, you can see these moments. But on TV, you see what they show you. So it is harder in those dead moments
Yeah.
to enjoy it.
I agree with that, although I still love watching baseball on TV and I like the pacing of it and I like the nostalgia of the sound of a baseball game on TV or the radio.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny that I used to listen to radio baseball all the time. There was a station in Gresham that carried the Cubs for whatever reason. So I would listen to the Cubs in the afternoon in the summers, and then I'd listen to the Mariners in the evening. I grew up a Twins fan though, so I don't know. I played baseball when I was a kid, and I was kind of a late bloomer, so I ended up transferring to a different high school to play baseball because I got cut from the big high school, and then it was too late to make it once I got better. Long story short, I played a little bit in college, but then after the college experience, like I couldn't keep my grades up and I dropped out. I kind of was burned out on baseball for a long time. It I come and go from it, I guess. It's also hard when your team is so far away. And even if I were a Mariners fan, like it's so far away, I can only go once or twice a year at most, so it's kind of hard to do.
So expensive now too. I went last summer to a Red Sox game and we took both the kids and I could not believe how much money we spent.
Mhm.
I mean, it was shocking. I mean, and I bought the tickets well in advance, but it's just so expensive now. So it's tough. Do you like baseball enough to get August to play and like do little league and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think, I'd like to coach it again. It might be the thing that gets me back into it more. I love I love the game. It's just hard to do, you know what I mean? And also it's interesting too, once we went away from cable, we're a streaming only family now. I used to just come home and I would just put on the Mariners game and it just would be on for 3 hours and I'd come and go a little bit, make dinner, whatever, and it's on. And now that's kind of not a thing anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
I have the major league package and I can turn that on, but like it's just not the same thing. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. I'm afraid of the little league, that whole like environment. I, I'm kind of like I feel like I dodged a bullet with my kids, neither one of them being interested in baseball. It seems really intense to me. And I have absolutely no experience. So I might be just talking out of my ass. I did go to the Little League World Series for a week once because
Whoa.
one of the teams outside of Boston was playing. And so we went to cover Saugus in the Little League World Series and it was crazy. And I think since then I'm like, oh God, I hope my kids don't want to play baseball. I can't deal with this. Obviously, these families were really intense, and these kids were like peaking at age 12 or whatever.
Mm.
But it kind of freaked me out. I was like, oh yeah, that's a lot.
Isn't that the problem with like youth sports? It's never the kids that are the problem. It's always the
Yeah.
parents who suck. And get way too intense about things. And I'm sure it's going to be the same. Do your kids play any sports at all?
Yeah, Alex plays club soccer, and it's usually really chill and quiet. I don't
Mhm.
know if that's like a North Portland thing or whatever, but we've never had any problems. Soren plays basketball, middle school basketball. He just started last year.
It depends how good they get too, because the higher the leagues, the worse it's going to be. If it's just
Yeah,
chill, low
yeah.
key.
So we haven't experienced anything like that as sports parents yet.
I'm concerned about it for sure, but it's like anything else. Like I don't want to make friends with the kids at my son's school. Like that's the thing. Like all this extra stuff I never had to do before, right? I don't want to like make small talk with people and then pretend we're friends because their kids know each other. And to me, that's kind of like the same thing with the sports. It's like this extra thing, and it's like almost anxiety about having to deal with other people. And maybe I should see counseling. I'm not sure.
Nope, I feel the same way. It's all these extra obligations that just keep getting added onto your list of stuff to do. And every single sport your kid does, it's like, oh, there's parents there, and I'm going to have to be a normal human being and engage with them. And then what if they want to do a play date? And then what if the parents want to like get together and, oh God, I don't have time for this. And then I'm like, am I Larry David? Why do I hate people? Welcome to Film Swap, the podcast where we challenge each other to watch the movies that we've let slip through the cracks or purposely shoved into the cracks for whatever reasons. I'm Angelica Thornton.
And I'm Nick Vole, and today we are talking about Major League.
Harry Doyle here, welcoming all of you to another season of Indians baseball.
Here's a list of the players we'll be inviting to camp.
This guy here is dead.
Cross him off, then.
We'd love for you to come to spring training for a shot at this year's club.
By the way, you were with me last night. Who's this chick on top of me?
We'd still like to take a look at you at our spring camp.
Not sure I can make it by then.
Who is that?
Serrano.
What's his religion?
Voodoo.
Hey! Willie Mays Hayes here. Play like Mays, and I run like Hayes. How you doing? What the hell league you been playing in?
California Penal.
Don't you have any proven major league talent?
Now, I want to put together a team that'll help us relocate to Miami.
You want us to lose?
We've been losing. What I want is for us to finish dead last.
Major League.
Major League came out in 1989. It's a sports comedy film. It follows the plight of the Cleveland Indians, now known, of course, as the Cleveland Guardians, as they go from last to first, effectively. New owner Rachel Phelps inherits the team when her husband dies. Her plan is to tank the season so she can move the team to Miami. Ted Lasso fans, you might recognize this plot. But the players she brings in aren't having it. They pull it together, and they win the pennant in the end. The movie stars Tom Berenger, Charlie Sheen, Wesley Snipes, Rene Russo, Bob Eucker, Margaret Whitten, Dennis Haysbert, Corbin Burnson, a whole bunch of talented people. It was a really big hit, cost only $11 million to make. It took in $75 million at the box office, spawned 2 sequels, both of which suck. But the movie itself is an absolute classic. And speaking of absolute classics, we are joined by a familiar face. You may know him as the voice of the Trailblazers on the radio. We know him as Portland's best traffic reporter. It's Travis Demers.
Yay, Travis. This is awesome.
There we go. Probably got to take off mute there. Yeah, back in my K2 days, I was known as Traffic Travis. And every now and then, some people will still, hey, there's Traffic Travis. And it's usually trying to take a shot at me in some way. But those were fun times. Hard to believe how long ago it was.
16 years ago.
Oh, my God.
I can't remember, Travis. Were you already there when I got there, or did you get hired? You were.
I was, yeah. It was, I was there from 06, 07 in that.
That's right.
It was about a year and a half. And then,
I got there in 07. So we overlapped for a while, and Nick was our producer in the morning.
Yep.
And it was just, Travis and I were both young. I mean, you're even younger than I am, but I remember just commiserating with you over lack of sleep and just not having a life. And just those hours are so brutal if you don't have any kids. If you have kids, you can make it work because you're like, okay, well, I'll go to sleep at the same time and time for the family outside of work. Otherwise, you're like, Jesus, this sucks. You were in that same position too, right, Nick?
I was 24 when I got the job, and I was also still fairly new to Portland, so I was a traffic reporter that didn't really know the roads very well. So that's usually pretty helpful. But, waking up at 3:30 when you're 24 years old and there are kids outside playing at, 9 o'clock at night when you're trying to go to sleep and it's still sunny out in the summer, that was an adjustment for sure.
Yeah. And then that wasn't, after the TV portion, you still had how many more hours of work at the radio side too. So it wasn't an easy gig for anybody. I just remember on the new technology, they had you clicking through the clicker that never seemed to work right.
Yeah. Beat the traffic. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I remember the sound of your chair, like just sliding across the floor and slamming into the set because you were like hustling constantly to like get everything updated. And it was like, oh, there's Travis's chair crashing into the desk again.
For my 45 seconds.
Yeah. Well, you didn't want to be a traffic person. It was just a little stepping stone.
Yeah. And that's why I got fired, because I didn't want to be a traffic person. I applied for an open sports anchor job, which, went to a very deserving Craig Birnbach. And basically, I was told that they wanted somebody more committed to traffic, and I was very happy to say that wasn't me. And we agreed to go our separate ways, and I think it worked out the best for everybody.
Yeah, I think so. Talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Yeah,
I just picture little Travis Demers growing up in Long Island saying, "Mama, someday I want to report traffic." Like, who's that person? Nobody does that. Nobody's going to be committed to being the traffic reporter.
I know. I haven't seen you in a long time, Travis. So congratulations on the Blazers. And this is so awesome. You deserve it.
I appreciate it.
And it's great. And I'm sure you're loving it.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally a dream job. And to Nick, your point, no, I wasn't running around saying I want to be a traffic reporter. I was saying I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. And here I am. So I'm one of the fortunate few who actually gets to do what they said they wanted to do when they were a kid. And that doesn't happen very often. And, in my work life, I couldn't ask for anything more. I got a wife and two little boys. Couldn't ask for anything more in my personal life. So things are good.
Let's get all the compliments out of the way, because it's going to drag the whole show down.
Yeah.
Travis, I think that you are extremely deserving of this as well. And I've never met anybody who works harder than you. And so just to see you get there. But I think when you say to somebody, you're such a hard worker, it almost is like saying, but you're not talented, but you're extremely talented. So it's like when all the things come together and when I'm driving around listening to you do it, I just can't believe it's, my buddy. So I'm really happy for you. And now we can stop being mushy and start talking about one of the filthiest.
Well, I love you guys. I'm not awake early enough to watch morning news anymore, but I see all of your tweets, Angelica, and I still follow you. I just don't really watch TV.
It's all right. I don't blame you, dude. I'd be sleeping through the whole show if I had a normal job and a normal life as well.
Right.
I don't wake up early enough to even sniff it. So yeah. All right. So let's talk about Major League. So we were talking about baseball on the show open. Travis, I know you're a huge baseball guy. You were a player as well. You picked this movie. I think we've all seen it. We're kind of violating.
No. I have a confession to make.
Really?
This is so embarrassing, but I'm just, honesty is the best policy. I can't believe this. Okay. So when you, on the last podcast, were like, we're watching Major League, you've seen it, right? And I was like, yeah, I've seen it. I thought you were talking about the other baseball movie with the ladies.
Oh.
League of Their Own.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there so confused, like in my head. I mean, mind you, I've had COVID and I've had brain fog for a couple weeks, right? And I was like, that is such a weird movie for Travis to pick. I was like, fair enough. He really likes A League of Their Own. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen it. Everyone has seen that movie. And then I went to watch this movie and I was like, oh, Major League. Totally different movie. And I have not seen it. And I watched it and I was psyched that I hadn't seen it. So I'm an idiot. I thought we were watching a completely different movie. It just sort of, and I've never seen it before. And I liked it. I'm glad we got to watch this one. Travis, I don't know why I hadn't seen it though. I have no idea.
Travis, why did you pick this movie?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, because Nick, you and I were going back and forth trying to pick a movie, and I mean there are a million movies that I would love to pick. I mean my favorite movies, like Goodfellas, and I know you guys have seen that, but as we're getting into baseball season here, and maybe the best character in the movie is the radio broadcaster, that I kind of lined up a little bit. I'm actually wearing my Harry Doyle shirt today that I got from Baseballism.
That's awesome.
So I figured, what? It's the start of the season. Let's have some fun and watch some baseball.
That's great. Yeah, I assume you saw this movie as a kid, right?
Kind of. It was one of those movies I was like 8 when it came. And it was one of those movies that because it had baseball in it, I'm like, Mom, can I watch this movie? Like, yeah, no, absolutely not. But when I was in 5th grade, which was like maybe 2 or 3 years after the movie came out, I was at a friend's house, and that was the first time that I got to watch it. So technically, yeah, I was 10, 11 years old when I finally got to see it. I should not have watched it at 10 and 11 years old, but now I've seen it probably a million times.
I don't know. The standards have changed. I would let my 10-year-old watch it. I'm trying to think. Is there any like real sex in it?
There's no sex, just a lot of swearing.
Just implied and a lot of profanity.
Yeah.
Which I guess in my house, Angelica, you're from Boston, I'm from Boston area, from the New York area. Profanity in the household at a young age is nothing that I don't know about you, but it was something I was definitely used to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had this on VHS, and I didn't see it right when it came out either, because I would have been 9. But I saw it when I was about 12, maybe, and I wore that damn thing out. I have seen this movie probably more than any other movie in the world, because I loved baseball. Yeah, I loved baseball. I owned it on VHS. We didn't have cable, so you watch what you got over and over again, and this was tailor made for me. And so one of those things I always worry: movies you like when you're a kid, are they going to hold up, or do you see those holes now as an adult? And I think this movie absolutely holds up. I think it is wildly entertaining and fun and funny and smart. What, Angelica, what do you think? You're the newbie here.
Interesting that I'm watching a 1989 film in 2023. I thought it was a little corny, obviously, very 80s.
Yeah.
I thought it was just like a regular baseball game, or a baseball season, I should say. I was a little bored at times until the actual baseball started going. And then I thought, this movie's great. I felt like I was a Cleveland Indians fan and this was real. So I think they did a really good job of drawing the viewers in as fans. I was committed at that point. So I thought it was really good. I love the ending. It was sort of like what Fever Pitch tries to do, only failed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a Red Sox fan, and I can say that. This just seemed more genuine.
For sure. Travis, what do you love about this movie?
As a kid, when I first started watching at 11, 12 years old, you see all kinds of sports movies, and they have these made up teams, right? And these fake teams, and not to, speak poorly about those movies, because some of those movies are great, like The Natural, right? The New York Knights, they didn't exist, but here I am, and I'm seeing, actual licensed teams, the Yankees, the Indians, all these teams that are in there. And, that was what drew me in, honestly, when I was young, is that it was baseball and it was the real teams. And then when you watch it, it's actually pretty damn good baseball. And there are a lot of things, aside from, the nitpicky stuff in the beginning, which I'm more than happy to nitpick. The actual baseball is pretty good, and it's pretty true to form. So as a baseball fan, you can believe a lot of that because they had actual major leaguers in there. The guy for the Yankees, Clu Haywood, the big, mean guy who played for the Yankees, the first baseman, he was a Cy Young Award winning pitcher for the Brewers. They had actual baseball players in there. They used extras for the spring training scenes that were shot in Arizona from, players who played for the University of Arizona. So the baseball part of it was actually really good. And then it's really funny, right? And, Bob Eucker, for the things I've heard about this movie over the years, that he, ad-libbed most of his lines, and they're brilliant. Because there's a lot of them are just so subtle, and then stuff you would never actually do on a broadcast, right? But he's funny, and he's Bob
Except
Eucker.
Just a bit outside. I mean, how many times have you heard it?
Yeah, right.
Right. And I was reading something about it today where I can't remember who said it, but there was a movie critic or somebody who said that phrase has been said by every single broadcaster on the air at some point in their career, just joking around and quoting the movie. And of course, I've done some baseball, not a ton. I've done some college baseball, some minor league baseball. Of course, there are times where I had to get that in there just because, why not?
Right. Yeah.
So that might be the most famous quote from a sports movie ever, maybe.
And this is an insanely quotable movie. And again, I've seen it so many times, but there are so many times in life I use quotes from this movie. so I do some play-by-play for high school stuff every now and again. And when I have like a color commentator who's not very experienced, I'll give them an opportunity to say something and they'll kind of just fumble it. And also I've said several times that there's a reason he's the best color guy in the game, folks. Like just like they do in the movie. Or
That's
like there's all
great.
these other, you know.
Like one of my favorites, Nick, is like, this guy here is dead. Well, cross him off then. There are so many things that, like, even just in daily use, we'll cross him off then. And everybody that I'm with knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, if you're of a certain age and you're a baseball fan, movie is like one of the holy trinity, right? I mean, Field of Dreams, maybe, or The Natural.
Bull Durham.
Yeah, Bull Durham. Yeah. I love how unabashedly profane this movie is, because you think about like a lot of movies, and the sequels made this mistake too. They go for this family friendly thing, and like that's not how baseball locker rooms are. They're not shucks and darn. They swear, right? And so I loved how, especially as a kid, because seeing them swear was titillating, right? You're a kid, you like to see that scene where Ricky Vaughn and Corbin Burnson's character get in the fight because he's pranked him with the red card. I could do that whole scene. I probably still could from memory, because it was so gleefully profane. And I don't know. That's one of the things.
No, I'm right there with you, right? Because we weren't allowed to swear as kids, even though, like I said, I don't know about you guys, but my parents did, and everybody around me did. So seeing that, it's like you could definitely quote that. And that scene specifically, the real blanking funny, I don't know how many times my friends and I said that to each other when we were 12 years old, as inappropriate as it was, but we all knew the line. We all said it. And yeah, that, especially when you're young, that kind of gave it that extra, this movie's cool.
And I'd like to go back to your comment about the baseball being realistic. That is really important. And I read that the director, David S. Ward, he actually like tried guys out a little bit. He didn't want people in the movie who couldn't pass as baseball players. Because I mean, as a sports fan, that's the number one thing that takes you out of the movie, when you're like, that guy sucks. Like I see like lists of all-time best basketball movies, right? And Teen Wolf is listed. I'm like, just like, no, because they're all terrible at basketball. I mean, it's not a basketball movie, but there's a lot of basketball. Right. So just the fact that they valued, like Charlie Sheen played high school baseball. He very clearly knows how to throw a baseball. Dennis Haysbert, apparently he could really crank homers. Like he actually could hit home runs during batting practice. And it's amazing that they actually cast it that way. I mean, some of them are stronger than others. I'd be curious, Travis, to see who you thought maybe was on the weaker end of the baseball player. I know who I think, but.
So here's the thing with that. Like I was watching it with a more close eye when I watched it again this morning, but Tom Berenger, in spring training, when he's catching pitchers, like he pulled it off. He looked like a catcher who was 40 years old and at the end of his career and, struggling to get by with his knees, but he pulled it off. Corbin Burnson trying to field the grounder at third, even though, yes, he was playing up the, I'm not going to put my body on the line for that type. It was bad. It was bad. He could swing a little bit, but him trying to field the ground ball was terrible. Willie Mays Hayes, Wesley Snipes can run. He's an athletic guy, but not all athletic guys can play baseball. Like, you ever see LeBron James trying to swing a bat? It's terrible. Watching him trying to catch and throw a ball was a little awkward, but in general, I thought it was good. I mean, like you mentioned with Charlie Sheen, I'd read things about him, hitting 85, 86 on the gun, throwing the ball, and he had good form. His glove was oddly straight, but he had good form, and he pulled it off.
Yeah, his glove was probably confiscated when he went into the California Penal League.
Yeah,
so he had to get a new one. And Angelica is a super hardcore baseball person. Do you notice that stuff at all?
I don't notice the little details. Like I wouldn't notice. I would have said Corbin Burnson was probably the one who seemed less like a real baseball player to me. But I wouldn't know why. I did feel like it was like watching real baseball. Like even the locker room scenes. I just felt like it seemed so genuine. I think that's why this movie was so good. I mean, just the grittiness and even the scenes of Cleveland and how blue collar it was. And I mean, they nailed Cleveland. They nailed the desperation of that fan base, I think, at the time, right? Which I can't imagine being in Cleveland when this movie came out. That must have been so fun. My mother-in-law's from Cleveland, and I've actually gone to a couple, at the time, Indians, Red Sox games when they were playing in Cleveland. And it's a really fun baseball town. I don't know. Have you guys gone to any games there randomly?
No.
I've been to the new stadium.
Yeah.
I say new, it opened up in 1994.
Yeah, I think it was brand new when I went. It was late 90s or something like that.
I have not seen a game there, but I have like walked around, and it's really cool. And we were playing the Cavs there, was it last year? And we're heading to the airport on the bus as they're taking down the big sign that says Indians in left field because they were changing their name to the Guardians. So I'm watching these cranes pull down this iconic sign that had been there for almost 30 years before they put the Guardian sign up there. So, I mean, that's about my experience with it.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was great. And it was fun. It was a fun crowd. Kind of reminded me of being at Fenway. Like my husband's family from Cleveland, they were huge Indians fans, and they're little on the edge of obsessive. And I was like, oh, this is nice. It's like, this is a real baseball town, even though they sucked.
Yeah. What's interesting is that they actually used Milwaukee County Stadium for the baseball shots in here. And when I was in Milwaukee a few years ago, I went to the site. They've obviously torn down that stadium now, and the new stadium, again, I say new, it's been there for 20 years. The new stadium is up there, and the old stadium is basically a parking lot now. And it has a statue for Hank Aaron. It also has a statue for Bob Eucker, who is the broadcaster in the movie. But he played for the Brewers, and he actually still does games for the Brewers. But where the old stadium is, they built a $3 million Little League stadium on that site. And you can actually, you can walk up there. You can't go in. It's a pretty nice looking stadium. But they have the home plate and the batter's boxes up on the concourse where the old stadium was. So I went up there. I'm like, oh, that's where Willie Mays Hayes won the game, and he slid into home.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You call your shot, stand in the batter's box, call your shot.
Yeah. What was that, a slider?
Angelica, you mentioned something about setting the tone of Cleveland as a city. And I think one of the great things this movie does is the minute the movie starts, they're doing that with that great Randy Newman song. I don't know if you actually listen to the lyrics of that song, but they're hilarious. Depressing. And so depressing. Burn on, Big River, burn on.
Yeah.
And then I just feel like it's great storytelling, and they do it. It's one of those things where they show you and they don't tell you. And then when they do need to tell you, they're clever about it. I think like the function that Bob Eucker serves often in this movie is kind of filling us in, the viewer, of where we are in this season, stuff that you don't have to do in like a ridiculously convoluted way. And he's doing it at such a funny way. You're just getting it, and the movie keeps moving. And I think that was really brilliant.
Yeah, I like it. I liked, even though, and it's, like the newspaper, the headlines, like just that whole compilation, I thought was great.
There was this part in the Randy Newman song where it says, he sings, Cleveland, city of lights, city of magic. And it's this gloomy day where it's foggy and you can't really see the buildings. And I just thought it was, very poetic into what the movie became. And I didn't realize this until today, but now the team is the Guardians. And when the team became the Guardians, I was reading about why they called them that. The Guardians of Traffic on the Bridge. There's a big, a zoomed in shot of those in the very beginning of the opening credits. I'm like, oh,
foretelling. Exactly.
Yeah. Very, very interesting that way.
Wasn't the Cuyahoga River so polluted that it like lit on fire a couple years
that's what
before
that song
this
was
movie
about.
came out? Yeah.
So, it says burn on, Big River, burn on.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And Travis, to the Guardians thing, my wife and I noticed that as well. I'm like, oh my God, there's the Guardians. Yeah, that's right. And that's because when that name came out and that name changed it, I didn't understand it because I'm not from Cleveland. When you read about it, it's actually a really neat name when you read about the local history about how it's named after the statues. But
it is weird to see the old logo and like the fans with the TP and like all the cultural appropriation obviously was totally normal back then. But when you see it in 1989 celebrated like this, you're like, yes, problematic, I guess. I guess they had to evolve, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that as sports fans?
I mean, it's clearly the most racist logo of, any
Yeah.
sports team ever. Like the Redskins name might be the most racist name, but at least their logo was, at least a true to form Native American.
Yeah.
Not this bright red caricature with these big teeth and big eyebrows. Like, how does anybody look at that and say, yeah, that makes sense. This is a good way to honor people of that descent. That's a great way to do it.
Well, but I mean, no matter how much the Indians said that it was to honor a player, an old player, that was just a smokescreen, obviously. It wasn't intended to be that. I thought it was interesting when they transitioned away from Chief Wahoo into the C. They were just the C for a while, trying to see if it would still play with the name, and obviously it didn't. So they eventually changed it. I think it's good they changed it. I think it's just hard, but there's such a weird line, right? So what is the line? Because I think the Indians was over it, but like something like the Chiefs, Kansas City Chiefs, like it's not like a chief. That's an admirable person. It's an admirable position. Like, I don't know if that, I know there is some pressure to change that, but then you get into weird things like the tomahawk chop is not great. And it's such a weird,
there's still so much of it in sports.
And I just think it's like anything else. You got to leave it up to Native Americans to see what they say about it and follow whatever they say. I mean, it doesn't offend me. I'm a white dude, but what do they say, and go with that, I guess. We've waded into some political
because I did sports talk radio for a long time up until last July. So when this stuff was going on, I did a lot of research into that. And really, who you can blame for all of this is the Braves, right? So when the Braves were in Boston, the owner had ties to a Native American tribe, and he named the team the Braves and did all the, well, you can't really call it branding in 1912 or whatever it was, but all the branding, and based it off of people he was close with in a local Native American tribe. And he called the team the Braves because they were the Bees before that. And then they were this team that was supposed to be terrible. They go on this magical run and win the 1914 World Series. And because of that, all of these other teams were like, well, we need to jump on the bandwagon. And that's when the Boston Redskins chose their name. The Indians were known as the Naps before that because of their player manager, Napoleon Lajoie, and they changed their name to the Indians. So all of this can be tied back to the 1914 Braves. And if they don't win, is this something that we're talking about today? My high school was the Indians until 2 years ago, and now they're the Wolves. And so many schools have had to change those names.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that. I mean, I knew some of those baseballs, but I didn't know how it just sort of sprouted from there. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm a nerd.
I used to be obsessive about reading about baseball. Like I had these books I would just read over and over and over again. That's not a piece of trivia I ever came across. How did you feel as a Yankees fan having your team be the villains? It's a compliment, right?
Well, yeah, it is a compliment. But to be perfectly honest, in the movie, like I'm rooting against the Yankees. I mean, I'm all about Rick Wild Thing Vaughn striking out Clu Haywood, and they made him out to be villains for a reason. Like how many of those movies are the team from New York is always the villain? Like Rookie of the Year, the bad guys are the Mets. Like when has anybody ever cared about the Mets? They haven't been good in a long time, right? But they're still the villain because they're the New York team. It's kind of just a badge of honor.
Well, that's the great thing about this film. Like you turn into an Indians fan, like a long suffering Indians fan. And that's not easy. I mean, I feel like anyone watching this would feel that way, regardless of, how much baseball you've had in your life.
Well, that's a testament to the storytelling though, right? I mean, it's easy to get behind this team, and even like an actor I don't love. We talked about this last week with The Big Chill, Tom Berenger. I don't really love him as an actor. He's so likable in this movie. You root for him. You definitely root for Charlie Sheen. Like he's so likable in this movie, and Willie Mays Hayes, I think
they're great underdogs for sure. So you mentioned Ted Lasso, and I realized right away, as soon as the team owner, what's her face, the former
Rachel Phelps.
Rachel Phelps, she was like a Vegas showgirl or whatever. Okay, this is basically the plot to Ted Lasso. Not exactly, but do you guys watch Ted Lasso?
Yes,
definitely.
Yeah, you love it.
Oh, it's great. I don't even like soccer, and it's nothing against like, I'm not one of those people who's soccer's stupid because I just don't
Right.
I don't have time for it, and so I'm not a soccer fan. But I love that show. My wife, who she liked soccer even less than I do, she can't get enough of that show.
Yeah, we're the same way.
Yeah, I've told my mom to watch it. My mom could care less about, soccer. So, yeah, anyway, I thought that was really interesting. And then I read about the alternative ending to Major League, which is crazy. Okay, so what was the deal? You guys know better than me. They tested it with audiences and realized it didn't work.
Well,
yeah, they wanted her to be the villain. The alternate ending was she takes the manager, Lou Brown, aside and says, basically, this is all, we're not making enough money. This was a way to motivate you guys so you would win, so we could pay your salaries. And it was all like a good thing behind the scenes. And they go out and they win and everybody's happy. And
yeah, I think they made the right choice.
Yeah, definitely.
It would have not had nearly the impact with that ending. So I'm glad they changed it. I mean, you need a villain, right? And it's such a cop-out to make the villain not a villain, especially when she's playing it so well. Like she's the actor, Margaret Whitten, is fantastic in this movie. Like you love to hate her. She is such an asshole. It's great.
Yeah, it is. It's so good.
I mean, and that's like one of the things too that's great is that every actor in this is nailing their part, right? I mean,
yeah.
Lou Brown, played by James Gammon, is fantastic. Can you imagine anyone else playing that role?
No, and he's so great. Like Nick, you talked about coaching. I coached high school baseball for a few years, and I can't tell you how many times that I quoted things from Lou Brown because I knew that the high schoolers I was coaching had never seen the movie before. So it was all going to be new to them. Like, I know this line's from Major League 2, which is terrible. But when he's like, hey, we won yesterday. If we win today, that's 2 in a row. If we win tomorrow, that's 3 in a row. That's what I call a winning streak. It has happened before. Like, I used that on my high schoolers. They had no idea what I was talking about. And the other coaches are laughing with me. And the players had no idea. It was great. He is so good in that movie. I got a guy on the other line about some white walls.
That's right.
How is it that he did not spend 50 years as a baseball manager? That's how good of an actor he is. I'm like, this guy is also, that voice is incredible.
And one of those lines I use all the time that he says, it totally out of like in different scenarios, is "Don't give me that Olay bullshit." Like I use that all the time. It's a great line read perfectly,
And you mentioned Tom Berenger. I don't have any strong feelings about him as an actor. I kind of feel like he's like the Huey Lewis of acting in the 80s. Like just, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? I don't even have to get into why. I was like, he's like a Huey Lewis. He's good for his time. He's just kind of a cheeseball. And, you wonder about him in real life and what he's like. I have questions, but he was so good in this movie, even when he's like seemingly stalking Rene Russo's character and walking into her apparently unlocked apartments.
Why is unlocked?
Yeah, how weird is that?
What the hell's going on?
He goes, the elevator door opens up to the apartment like there was no door. It's like, oh, I'm going to take the elevator and go into this multi-million-dollar apartment. Is that what happened back then?
I was like, what happened here? And he walks in.
Here's my theory. I have a theory. That's open because it's like the penthouse, right? It opens right up into the house. They're having a party and they're expecting guests. They've left it unlocked.
Okay.
He walks
but there's
in,
no door. It's just the elevator.
But that's what I mean. Like maybe they unlocked the access. This is a theory. I don't know.
Yeah, you have to have a pass for the elevator to stop on that floor kind of situation. But then he walks into her apartment. He walks right up into her apartment and she's just like sitting there. And I'm like, hello, honey, I'm home kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. And I always noticed like he walks in and he's wearing his metal cleats on her hardwood floors. And I say, no, stop. You're going to ruin the floor.
Yes, they're beautiful parquet floors. I noticed that too.
Every time I notice.
It's amazing the things that we think about now.
Well, I mean, even her getting out of her car and walking into her building, I'm like, is she going to lock the door? Someone's going to break in. I mean, we do live in Portland and that would be, a huge mistake. But just there are things like that about the film I could not not focus on.
What would you guys do if you saw the bullpen car just driving around on the street?
Take a picture for sure. That's an Instagram post right there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that whole storyline with him like going after her, and it was okay. And that's the part where earlier I said, oh, it was a little slow, but I am allergic to these kinds of movies getting weighed down by like the romantic storyline. It has to be really good for me not to be annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think this one was super annoying because they didn't get into it too much, but I wasn't a huge fan of those parts of the movie.
It's the weakest part of the movie for me.
Yeah. Chasing her around the library and all that. And it was just very cliche.
The line too, like you mentioned, between creepy and romantic is in movies is not great. It felt a little creepy.
Yeah, I agree.
How many times have we heard somebody of the generation before us say, about their husband, like, oh, he asked me out 1,000,000 times and I just wasn't interested, but he wore me down and I said yes, and now I love him. Like, now that's called stalking, and there is a prison sentence that comes along with that. And now it's just weird and creepy.
Yeah.
Well, first off, the generation before you and I, Travis, is in this call with us right now on this podcast. Angelica is significantly older than both of us.
I'm like 5 years older than you, Nick. Actually, more than that, maybe a little bit. What year were you born?
You're 4 years older than me.
Oh, there you go.
So you're 5 years older than me then.
Yeah.
I just wanted to insult Angelica. Sorry.
That's good.
It was very nice of you.
Sure.
No, but totally. Like it's weird. It's rom-com behavior, but I think it's fortunate that ultimately it's not the focus of the movie. It's a side plot.
Yeah.
And we can move past it.
Right. And it was a tool to show us like how he's struggling as a older baseball player. I think he's only supposed to be in his 30s or something, late 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, Tom Berenger, like in today's years, he looks like he's like 50.
Yeah.
That was the 80s like
for
38,
you. 39.
Like he looks older
than we are right now, and he looks like he's 50.
A lot younger. Yeah. That was the 80s for you. I mean, high school kids in 80s movies look like they were middle-aged. Also, Rene Russo, wasn't this one of her first parts?
One of her very first movies.
Just just becoming a star. And Wesley Snipes too, right?
Mm-hmm, I think so.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, this had really good casting. We saw Neil Flynn, who ended up in Scrubs in the middle.
Yeah, he was,
you know what I'm talking about?
He was one of the fans.
The fans that there was like they followed along with.
Oh, like
first he's on the construction site, and then he's in the. So he's the custodian, the janitor from Scrubs, and then he was the dad in that sitcom, which I've never seen though, The Middle.
Mm.
So, but I think this was his first like anything role, basically.
I recognized his face, but I guess I didn't know from where.
What? And then I love Bob Eucker. I mean, you obviously do too, Travis. He's great.
Yeah, I mean, what he did in the movie, like that's not something as a broadcaster that I'm actually going to do in a game. But there are so many times in my head, like I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but not that far off from that like something happens in a game and I desperately want to channel my inner Harry Doyle and I can't, even in basketball. But it's funny, like the one GD hit. You can't say that on the radio. It doesn't matter. Nobody's listening anyway. Like there are times that I've felt that way. And he's great. It's funny though. And Nick, I don't know if you picked up on this. For years and years and years watching the movie, I heard him say "off the reservation," and I had no idea what he meant. It's like, oh, wait a minute, they're Native Americans, and somebody did it so far that it's not on the reservation anymore. I get it now.
Yeah, I remember that line for sure. Yeah.
I hate to admit how long it took for me to figure that out. I'm like, what is the reservation? Where
is it?
Well,
when you're a kid, right? You're not gonna that's not gonna register with you when you're a little kid and you watch it over and over again.
I might have figured that out today.
So when you're doing Blazers games, you don't have a fifth of Jack Daniels there with you the whole time?
No, I don't. I also don't have the cup of Miller Lite that he starts out with. And that's another thing that's so great about this movie is that he starts out not drinking alcohol. And as the season goes, then there's the cup of Miller Lite. Then, Nick, as you pointed out, there's the bottle of Jack Daniels. And it just keeps going. And he's getting drunker and drunker as they're playing worse.
That's amazing. I didn't even notice that he drank more as the movie went along. I just know he had some. I didn't notice the progression. That's great. I think it's amazing that Bob Eucker, his career is incredible to me. So he's an average major league player, plays for a long time. He's not a star, but he's not a scrub, right? He's a backup catcher for a long time. He gets beer commercials because he's so gregarious. He turns beer commercials into, or broadcasting and beer commercials into Mr. Belvedere, like he's a baseball player. It's amazing to me. And then he's in this.
I actually think he's a really
role.
good actor. I think he's a great actor.
He used to be one of Johnny Carson's favorites, and he would go on Johnny Carson's show all the time, and that's one of the places that like people recognized him. And then he, gets the beer commercials, like you said, and he's in Mr. Belvedere, but he actually is the radio broadcaster for the Milwaukee Brewers. Like he's
still right. He's 89 or something like that.
Yeah,
he's still
he was
doing
calling
it.
World Series games in the 90s for NBC. And because I have the Sirius XM package, I listen to a lot of baseball play-by-play when I'm in the car. And he's getting up there. He's not what he was, but you can still hear him calling games. And even just for the nostalgia of being a fan of this movie, like hearing him call actual baseball games still is pretty cool.
So your current job notwithstanding, just in a magical fairyland here, would you ever want to do baseball announcing like Harry Doyle?
So I've thought a lot about this because there's been these rumors for years that Portland's going to get a major league team, and hopefully the Portland Diamond Project and the folks over there are able to make that happen. In my current life, no, because I see what an 82 game schedule and traveling does to a family. And now you make that 162 game schedule plus spring training, plus the playoffs. And it's in the summer when my kids are out of school, or when they are school age will be out of school. Like I would never, ever, ever see my kids.
Yeah.
So in my current life, no. If I was a single guy, yeah, I would, because I don't know what else I would do with myself. But
what's your number one sport, Travis?
It was always baseball. Baseball's always been my favorite sport. I mean, I played very briefly in college, but I've coached high school ball. It's what got me into sports. My grandmother grew up in the Bronx in the 20s and 30s, so
that's
her
awesome.
fault I'm a Yankees fan. But as much as I love baseball and as much as I love being around the game, the schedule will be just way too difficult to try and have a family. And that's obviously more important.
I think that what you're saying is totally valid. But in this ideal scenario where those kinds of things don't matter, I have done a little bit of play-by-play, as I mentioned, for high school level stuff. I would love to do baseball. I think it would be, because you have so much time. It's like a
4 hours
where something is happening in front of you during it. You know what I mean? You can really stretch out and talk and get into some things. And baseball is just great in that way.
It is. And I was talking to Kevin Calabro about this a few days ago, because he'd filled in and did a few Mariners games back in the day. And baseball is one of those sports that you really need to be around it every single day to know the ins and outs of the team and to really, truly tell the stories. I've done some baseball through the University of Portland. I've done, a few dozen Hops games, and those are fun. And I love baseball and being able to tell the stories. And I work some of my own stuff in there too. But the other problem with that is, like, in the NBA, that even a game that goes, double overtime is going to go like maybe a max possible ever, like 2 hours and 45 minutes. Right? We had a 4 overtime game in the playoffs a few years ago, and that was like 3 hours. That's the average time in baseball. Yeah. I called a game at the University of Portland once that went 16 innings, and it just kept dragging. And there was no score until the 16th inning, so it was actually relatively short for a 16-inning game. But you could be there forever. Rain delays, day games after night games. You get home from the ballpark at 1 a.m. or whatever, and you got to be back at like 9 or 10. It's just like that lifestyle. It would just be brutal. And I would think that eventually I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. But those guys who do it last forever too. So it's interesting. And maybe you just got to be built the right way for that. Yeah. We have drifted pretty far from Major League. Do we have any more comments on the movie? Or
so I would guess that you guys do not recommend Major League 2 and 3.
2 is okay. Like 2's all right. It's way campier than the first one. It's like in American Pie, how the character of Stifler turns into this caricature of the original character of Stifler in the first movie. Like that's what I see happening with the series of Major League. It went from a comedy but it was pretty serious and smart to this kind of cheesy, campy, like, okay, like not totally worth my time, but not totally a waste of time. Major League 3 I saw once, and I will never subject myself to that ever again. I would not recommend it.
Isn't the problem though, like the first movie was so popular with kids, they made it as an adult comedy, but it was so popular with kids, they realized, well, if we make this next one PG, we'll have an even bigger box office because parents will let their kids go.
It was about selling tickets at that point. So
yeah. So,
but like we talk about the character of Pedro Serrano, played by Dennis Haysbert, and like at the time, you know, a Cuban refugee wasn't common, right? And all the stereotypes about voodoo and all that stuff. Now, like, okay, he's from Cuba, who cares, you know? In Major League 2, they've got a guy coming over from Japan, and the stereotypes of that player are 1,000 times worse than the stereotypes about Pedro Serrano's character. And it's like, you watch that now and it really makes you cringe.
Yeah. And that's interesting too with Pedro Serrano, because I mean, I'm not an expert on voodoo, but isn't it Haitian? It's not Cuban.
Yeah.
And also, so that was kind of weird. And yeah, like they make light of his religion and all that, but I also thought it was kind of clever that he's not, the players make fun of it, but the movie doesn't necessarily make fun of it, if that makes sense. And the character of the older pitcher, whose name is totally escaping me, Travis
Harris.
Yeah. He is a Christian, but he's a hypocrite and an asshole, and he's shown as such. And I thought that was a clever way to balance out some of that. Like, he's not
that's
a nice
true.
guy.
Good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's very disrespectful towards Pedro's beliefs, but he gets his comeuppance, right? I mean,
he gets hit in the head with the bat,
and just repeatedly shown to be a hypocrite. So I appreciated that too. It balanced things out for me a little bit, you know, just to show they're all kind of full of it a little bit, you know?
Yeah, it was a good movie. I'm glad I watched it. I'll watch it again for sure. I would recommend it to the 5 people left who haven't seen this film.
Show your kids, get them a VHS copy, say we're canceling cable. This is what you have now. And they'll grow up to be just like me.
Funny, I was talking to our babysitter who is 22. She's downstairs with the boys right now. And I was telling her that I was coming upstairs to my office to talk to you guys, and why. She had never heard of the movie. And so I'm telling her about it. I'm telling her who's in it. Again, Wesley Snipes. And she said, who's that? So that made me feel really old.
Yeah.
Does she even know who Charlie Sheen is?
I think so, but probably because of 2.5 Men. And,
yeah, that's true.
And this is peak Charlie Sheen, man. He was so charming, and like he's a handsome guy, and like this is pre-weirdo Charlie Sheen. Or
I liked watching him in this. This was really good.
He's in the restaurant and he's got the leather jacket with the sleeves and no shirt.
Tie.
And tie. He's like, I feel like a banker in this thing.
It's so good. So good. And then I just want to say again, I love how Tom Berenger is supposed to be. He's like the leader of them, but he's still a good guy in the film. You know, despite the creepiness with the ex-girlfriend, I don't know. I thought that was really great. I thought none of them were real dicks. I mean, even
Harris.
Oh, not Harris, the
Dorn.
Yeah.
Even Dorn, who's, you know, he's got his priorities in the wrong place. I mean, in the end, it was all good. I mean, none of them were bad guys. There were no villains on the team, really.
Yeah, because you've got Phelps to be the villain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I like when they go to Dorn's house, and it's such a indicator of the time. He's like, we're thinking about taking this from either Oriental or Santa Fe. I'm like, oh, that's 1989. There it is. Yeah. I like to I had something else in my head. Sorry. Edit, cut this. Sorry. Do we have anything else to talk about, since I just fucked this up and we have to cut here anyway?
Let's see. Yeah. Did we not? I think we covered it all.
It's just good to talk, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to see you, Travis.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get to see each other in real life someday.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
I'll try to have something this summer. I will invite everybody in.
That'd be great. Angelica, how old are your kids?
Almost 14 in a couple weeks, and 10 and a half.
Yeah, because you didn't have kids when we were working
No.
together. Now you've got
No, I just
14
I
and a
just
half.
I moved to Portland like, I don't know, 6 months after I got married or something like that. And
Great.
how old are your kids, Travis?
My oldest will be 5 in May. My youngest will be 3 in June.
Wow, you are in the thick of it. You both are.
Yeah,
Those are
and now
tough years.
Now that I'm not working in the summer, I'm dad in the summer. So
Yeah.
I'm dad. And they both have baseball player middle names.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
What are their names?
My youngest is Lawson Mantle for Mickey Mantle. And my oldest is Lincoln Abbott for Jim Abbott.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd.
Well, let's wrap it up and we can stop recording and we can continue talking, but that will finish the show. So Angelica, is it your turn to pick or is it mine?
I don't
mine because you did the big chill.
Yeah, that's right.
We're about to hit April, so maybe we'll start Oregon month. And I'll recommend Zero Effect.
Zero Effect. Okay. I'll put it on my list.
We'll wrap it up here. So let's do Travis, thanks so much for joining us. It's really great to see you, and thanks for taking the time and picking this movie that I think we all love.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a lot of fun to see you and to talk about this movie and watch it with a different eye. And sometime down the line, I'd love to come back if you'll have me and maybe pick a movie that I haven't seen and go from that angle. That would be cool.
Yeah, we would love that, Travis.
Okay, well, so next week we are kicking off Oregon month. It is my turn to pick, and I'm going to choose my very favorite Oregon movie. It's kind of under the radar. Travis, I recommend this for you too. It's called Zero Effect. It stars Ben Stiller and Bill Pullman. It's about a private detective who is a recluse genius who gets hired for a job in Portland by a timber baron to figure out who stole his car keys. It's hilarious and moving and awesome. And when you watch it, you'll know every location they shot in if you live in Portland, because it's just all over the place. And I can't recommend it highly enough. So we'll talk about that next week.
All right. Yeah, I can't wait. Good to see you guys.
Film Swap is produced and hosted by Angelica Thornton and Nick Vole. You can watch or listen on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Follow Angelica on Twitter at Angelica KATU and follow Nick at Nick Vole. Share your thoughts on the films we discussed there, and we might just read them on the show. Music by John Michael Farley and Nick Vole.